Yeah, I mean, no, you set everything up. Okay. Is it okay? Okay, I'm good. Um, so you want to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
All right. So, first off, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so excited to have you.
Yeah, me too.
Um, this has been a long time coming. First question, of course, is going to be what drew you to woodworking? What was the inspiration for that?
Ever since I was a child, like, and I'm sure you understand this too, I was the kind of person who's like a compulsive tinkerer. Like, I always have to be making something, making things with my hands. Like, I feel like I'm a very practical artist. Like, all of the art forms that interest me the most are very practical. And I just feel the best when when I like could make something that, worked for me and was like, a practical, useful object. The thing I mentioned to you is that my grandparents actually were seamstresses and they owned a men's clothing store. And my
Right.
mom is also a really, really good seamstress. And my sister is also a really great seamstress. So that's like our lineage of garment making. I always grew up around my mom's sewing. She made us all these like beautiful matching dresses and she did all this embroidery. It just introduced me to like the value of handcrafted items and the process of handcrafted things. And in our basement, we had like the craft room, which, had like four sewing machines and two sergers and just bins and bins of scrap fabric and buttons and zippers and construction paper and hot glue and all this kind of stuff. And, we didn't have cable. There was no Disney Channel or Cartoon Network in our house. So
Right.
all you had to do was, all we would do was, go down in the craft room and make some like weird art project. And I sewed a lot as a kid. I wasn't very good at it and I made like a lot of abominations, but I think like crafting so much as a kid, there were no stakes. And it really helped me be
Sure.
like just incredibly creative. And like, I don't have many pictures of the things I made when I was a kid, but I wish I did because there was some really weird stuff in there because I had to be so scrappy because I didn't have any money because I was like 7. So I
Right.
was like, I would just get all the, I could barely pull together 1 yard of fabric, let alone like 2 yards of fabric. So I would get all the scraps from like my mom's leftover projects and I would sew them together and make these like big patchwork swaths. And I would make these like purses out of this like patchwork material, just like the most ugly things you've ever seen. But, it just taught me the process of like, troubleshooting. Maybe things don't go the way you want, like, fixing
Sure.
mistakes. And yeah, like I feel like in every craft I've ever done, I've always had to be so scrappy because when I started woodworking, I was also didn't have a lot of money, definitely couldn't do something like buy a cabinet table saw or even buy lumber. That's how I got interested in like crafting in the first place and like being a craftsman. But I didn't get introduced into wood as a medium until I was in high school and I did set building for my local community theater. And so that was just like, building these sets like 2x4s, using the chop saw, using a router, using a power drill. I got introduced to all those things. And that was kind of like the first time in my life, yeah, I can do this. It
Yep.
really broke down a huge barrier for me. And I'm so grateful for that because it broke down a barrier at a relatively young age, which was 14, that like, yeah, I can use a chop saw and it's not like the most dangerous thing in the entire world. Like I can build stuff and I know how to use a power drill. And I think that's like access to that kind of, like access to tools for a lot of teenagers and the knowledge of how to use them is something that's really lacking. I think a lot of people have this kind of crafty mindset where they want to build stuff, but they don't have the resources, or like the knowledge or
Right.
the confidence. But I didn't like, that dropped off. I went to college and I didn't get into like woodworking and furniture building until I was in college. And the anecdote is like I was on our like my engineering school's robotics team. And so we would make these robots. I wasn't very good at it. I was the social media manager for our team. And that was like I was really good at that,
Okay.
but I wasn't good at the actual robotics, which like makes sense at this point, but like we would stay up really late and like pull all kinds of all-nighters, and so I got a hammock for the robotics warehouse and I wanted to build like a stand for it, so I built this like really crappy
Okay.
2x4 stand. And after that I was like, oh my gosh, I can make my own furniture. This is crazy. And I just fell down this rabbit hole where it was like initially like straight up DIY, where it was like, oh, people like redoing their showers or building like plywood furniture and like, building a deck. And then it just funneled more and more into like fine woodworking. And it was just like, I know you've mentioned this before where something just clicked. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. And I just like got obsessively addicted to it, like watching as much YouTube as I could, like trying to learn about it. And I joined my local makerspace, and the rest is history. So
That's great.
yeah.
I love that.
I have so much
Like you've made a couple good points of one, like the age where you start. You're kind of like at this fearless age when you're 14, you know, like anything's accessible, anything's possible.
Exactly.
And we didn't have wood shop when I was in high school, which I
Same.
think is such a critical age to introduce those things. And I really wish I did grow up around a shop, but I think I didn't have an interest because there wasn't like necessarily an applied idea to it. So I think it's like that's my second point is, you know, age is really critical for the most part. I mean, I jumped into this at like 26, but
Yeah.
having that like fearless attitude about it, I think is great. And like the sooner you can introduce these things is awesome. But also like having a way to apply it. I think the reason I did it was because I wanted to make a specific thing. Like you're talking about making the hammock. It's like, yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
how do I achieve this instead of just I want to jump into woodworking.
Yeah, I want to learn how to cut a dovetail for like some unspecified reason. Like,
right.
like that's like not like super inspiring. And I would love to teach like younger kids, like especially younger girls, because you did talk about the age thing where it's like when you're like 25 and you like got, maybe you bought a house and you're like chilling there. It's like, oh, what I'm gonna do right now, I'm gonna buy a table saw and a router. It's like it just doesn't seem like as feasible when you're older. You're like, why would I start this whole new thing? And I got into woodworking when I was 23. So like I was still older, but there was like a higher calling. It was inevitable. It was meant to be here. But it's like, yeah, like but the thing is every single person should have some, like the fact that they took shop like out of like every high school across the country, like it's just not a thing anymore, is insane, because every person should just have basic access to that kind of knowledge just so they can like fix whatever around their house, or just
basic skill, like
it's a basic skill. Yeah.
And an opportunity for it to be accessible. Like it's really hard justifying getting into what we do when you have to buy all this expensive tooling just to get started. So to have shop space where it is like under instruction and everything's set up and ready to go, like that's the only way I could see myself jumping into this had I not had a specific reason to do it.
Right, where it's just like, oh, like I'm going to second period instead of just like, starting. And another thing is, maybe you do have a strong passion to start woodworking and you want that kind of education. If you're an adult, a lot of it is like, oh, taking a week off to take a class somewhere, or like, let alone like a 3-month intensive or something like that. The cost and like the commitment of that is a lot, and it's not a lot of people are going to do that or can afford to. So,
and
yeah.
the places that offer that are often like isolated. Like you're not just talking taking a week off, you're talking finding housing and like traveling, and there's so many factors into it. It makes it a very inaccessible thing. I originally found you on TikTok.
Yeah.
Like 3 or 4 years ago, and I was like, first,
God.
I mean, seeing another woman in this is always a privilege. Seeing the way you presented content in this like safety forward, teaching forward style, but it was also so just like engaging. I was like, what is this? This is amazing. Like
thank you.
it's really incredible and unique to anything I'd ever seen before, male or female. Like it was just this very I was like going there, I was like, I don't even know if I'm gonna learn woodworking. It just makes me feel good like to watch this stuff.
Back to like you said, it was like I try to be like as inviting as possible, obviously, because I think the early years of my woodworking were just punctuated by this gripping self-consciousness. I've been woodworking for like almost 6 years now, and maybe for the first 3 years, like I never felt good when I was woodworking, and that's like a horrible thing, because it's like if you're a hobbyist, you obviously want to do this to have fun and
relaxing thing.
Yeah, but also like conquer hurdles and like build skills and stuff. But I had such like, not saying I had a horrible time, but it was very chaotic, and I never felt good or confident, because I just felt like not all of it, but a lot of the content out there was so high level, where I was seeing these people who just everything, and obviously people can edit videos however, but people that every cut is perfect, and they've never made a mistake. And it's just this beautiful video that goes together perfectly. And they have a CNC in their shop, a cabinet table saw. They got this big warehouse they work in. All the dust collection is perfect. And I wanted to make so many things, but I just remember constantly saying to myself, like, I can't do this. Like, I can't be like these people on the internet who are living this like pristine woodworking life where I'm here like having like these horrible breakdowns because I don't know what I'm doing. And it's just really important for me to like show all of the mistakes I make and bring a levity to it, because it's like you don't want to go in the shop and just always feel this heaviness and like sadness about what's supposed to be your hobby.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so much of this is like, I don't know anybody that's immune to imposter syndrome as it is.
Right.
But it's even more crippling when you're looking at examples and it's like, you're not seeing like how they got to that point. You're just seeing the like absolute best.
Yes.
So, yeah, you were providing this like very authentic view into woodworking that I was like, even your most recent video where you're showing the veneering process and you're like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
maybe this didn't work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the whole like, despair and like
Yes.
the 5 stages
The
of
grief. Yeah. The horror. Yeah. It's like, yeah, you're never like nothing will ever go smoothly. And the thing is, like, I'm not a professional woodworker. I'm a hobbyist. Like I said, I barely make anything twice. So every single project I do is like, it's not to be the most efficient, build or like the most perfect build, but every project I do is like a total journey where it's like I'm doing a lot of things for the first time, or like I think the thing I've built the most of is I've built 4 bed frames, and that's like the most I've done something. Yeah. In the future, I would like to have a peaceful woodworking practice. Obviously, like I'm not trying to just make my life like super stressful. I do like having like doing the journey and like, exploring new methods and stuff. And
I get that. I feel like a lot of my builds are because I do it because I want to try something out, which causes a whole new set of like issues. And I think it's important to highlight the hobbyist woodworker aspect. Like I'm coming from a different point because I do this for a living.
Right.
So like there's a lot less window of like risk I can take.
Exactly.
So it's so enjoyable to see somebody like executing that or like working towards that. And I can appreciate it because I tend to do the same thing anyway, even though it's not the most smart like business move often.
Yeah.
It's what makes it fun. It's what makes it enjoyable. I think it's great, and people getting to see that and just also see that process. Like it doesn't come out right the first time every time. It's just not reality.
Yeah. Like I'm the kind of person where like I am not a perfectionist. I'm very chaotic. I instead, like, I know a lot of people who they will do something meticulously, they'll plan it and then they'll get it right the first time. And I'm like, I'm just gonna go as fast as I can. If I gotta do it 4 times, that's honestly fine with me, because I just like can't slow down. And like my philosophy in the shop is just like do it again and again until you get it right. And that's just how it's going to be. And I love making very, very useful and just like daily use objects. Like but that are also like art,
Yeah.
That's really fulfilling to me. Yeah.
I love that. And I think there's like this balance you can find, whatever personally, like between each person of what level. I know people that woodwork and they make things purely for function and they feel great about it. And they're like, it's cute. Like I feel good about it. I executed this in the time frame that I feel good with, and they're happy. And I'm like, that's just as beautiful as the thing I'm gonna make and take probably way too long to make.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel good and it's like something that brings you joy, then that's the important part, I think.
Yeah, because like there's such a sliding scale of people who make furniture, because there's people who, it's completely for function and they're not thinking too much about the aesthetic. They just want to do it completely functionally. But then there's people who don't even really care too much to touch a power tool and they'll make everything on the CNC, but the form and the shape is like the peak importance to them. And I'm like in the middle,
I mean, I love also that you've made some of the early videos I watched on TikTok where you just like building things literally with, you shared this, like the 2 tools you would start with.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like I always, because I have such sympathy for when I started out in woodworking and I had nothing. And I would literally like drive around and go to tree lawns and like steal drawer slides off desks that were on the tree lawn. And like, it's like I always like I build some slightly high level stuff, and like I feel like my shop is pretty well fitted now. Like I have a joiner, a planer, a contractor table saw, and a router table. But it's like I always like whenever I'm doing like an instruction video, I always try to like include the bare bones, like what you could do with a handsaw or a power drill, or what you could do with a circular saw and a power drill, and like just the 2 tools to start out with, and then maybe you get an orbital sander or you hand sand it. And yeah, like on TikTok, I did like, yeah, the 3 base tools I would use. And then for my workbench, which I'm sitting on right now, I did drill board, mortise, and tenons, but I used dowels as the tenon that you could get from the store. So you only need a power drill and a drill bit to make like a tenon. And so my workbench, which is really quite nice, I think, was just done with a circular saw and a power drill. And like I did some planer stuff and router stuff for myself, but like functionally you could do it, get this joinery done. And that was one of the things I was most proud of, because it's like, I will do a lot of builds for myself, but I do like to incorporate a lot of builds where it's just the most bare bone tools that somebody could get access to.
It's so powerful because it is so intimidating. I love that you did the drawboard tenons, because you don't, like you said, you don't need clamps for that.
No clamps.
Also.
Yeah. It's such a good hack, because clamps were such like, I remember when like I have Harbor Freight clamps, and that was like the biggest investment for me at the time. And
it's so expensive.
They're so expensive. And I remember like I was so stressed out when I like was trying to buy clamps, because I was like, wait, this is the cheapest one. Like, how is this the cheapest one? I'm really, really lucky now that like I've been like working my full-time job for like 5 years. I can afford a lot, but I like to think that I can almost be like some sort of mad scientist who just tries out a bunch of stuff and finds the cheapest way to do things for people, and then sharing that like after the fact. It is really upsetting that like woodworking is inherently pretty expensive to do. Yeah. And
it's hard to get around it. And that's why I love what you do. It's like so creative in the sense that, and you're still, like you said, you have access to these other tools, but you're still making things with that mindset, which is so important, because it is. Yeah, I don't know if I could justify going and buying two sets of bar clamps for one project if I'm not even sure I want to do this. But it's like, I'll have a drill around my house forever. I'll use a skill saw at some point in my life again.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I can justify purchasing these things, you know?
Yeah. And I hope I never lose that mindset, because so few people are living that life where it's like they have access to a 2-car garage that no car ever needs to go inside of, and you know, all these tools and such. Yeah.
And your whole shop setup, which I love that we're in your shop right now.
Yes.
It's such a like inspiring thing too, because it is, you've utilized what you have in the best way possible. And that is a huge like lesson in itself, is like, how do I make this work in this space of a basement, you know?
I think a lot of my like arts and crafts that I've done have all been punctuated by this just scrappiness and this need to just make it work with barely anything. I think like part of my mission is just showing people that like I didn't have a woodworking grandpa or a woodworking dad. And I think that's how a lot of people get introduced into this hobby. I started with just a power drill. That was all I had. And it was rough getting started, but like you can still do it. And yeah, I just want people to not feel this pressure to be this sort of woodworker where you have it all figured out and everything's working perfectly. There's such a pressure for perfectionism. And I just want to be as goofy as I can, just so people feel comfortable, you know, like
it should be light. I think there's such a heaviness to it with like how methodical and how practiced it has to be. There isn't a lot of room for that, like humor and lightness and warmth, really. Like when I watch your stuff, I'm always like, oh, I feel like I just want to be in, like, I want her to teach me all of these things. Like, it's a very comfortable like space to be in, and very welcoming. I just think it's refreshing to see that and see that executed so well. So
thank you. Yeah, and like we've talked, woodworking is such a somber tradition, like, you know, so it's really hard it's hard for a lot of people to like feel that levity or feel that like sense of ease around it.
Right. Ease.
There's such an there's such an intensity about the tradition. It's like, I definitely respect the tradition, and I want people to know what makes a good piece and what is good craft and what's not. But also like, if you're just trying to make a cutting board for your mom, like I want you to, you know, just have fun. You know, if you mess up, like the Lord of woodworking isn't going to come down from the heavens and like judge you for it. Like, you know, and that's the thing. It's like, I'm mostly here for like like, obviously I'm here for the hobbyists. I'm not here to teach professionals anything, but I think a lot of people, a lot of hobbyists enact this kind of super rough mentality that maybe should more be applied to someone who's making a product that's going to be paid for, where it's like,
Sure.
you don't need to be so hard on yourself. You can do it again and don't
And
worry.
truly, like, it's not, none of this is the end of the world. Like,
Yeah,
I'd
exactly.
much rather come out of this making something and really taking joy out of it and like allowing space for others to do that. So it is like,
Mhm.
I think really critical to have this just like different perspective on it. It's like, oh, it's really okay because it really isn't the end of the world.
Okay, yeah. No,
Yeah.
and I'm glad to get that. Yeah, like I hope I make people feel comfortable because I mean, I've always felt like very out of place. And like, I hope that somebody who's like always felt like really too weird or whatever, or like, not fitting in like the woodworking community, which can be a very certain type of like, it's very male dominated and very white. So it's
Yes.
like, I hope that like anybody who maybe just like feels like a little bit beat down by that can like get a little bit of respite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I understand that.
yeah.
I had a different background, but like yeah, it's dominated by men. So we have like even holding that space, me going on TikTok and being like, oh my God, there's another woman woodworking. Like, what is this?
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
is so empowering. So for me, just even seeing another woman on TikTok, another woman woodworking on
Well, yeah,
TikTok was
another woman.
incredible. Another
Yeah.
woman woodworking. I should word this differently.
Yeah.
So first of all, seeing another woman woodworking is always a thing, but
Mhm.
on TikTok in this like warm and like funny and welcoming space was like so cool. I was like instantly hooked.
I'm so good. Yeah. And the thing is, one thing I was thinking about for all the problems smartphones give us, the internet is so blessed because if I was woodworking now, I would have contact with zero women in woodworking because it's like, where am I going to find them, but I know so many amazing women now just through Instagram and YouTube. Yeah, I think it's really hard to take up a lot of space as a woman, especially in a male dominated field, because there's always this pressure, don't be too loud, don't be too annoying, don't be
Right.
too pushy, and don't be too confident for
Right. And
sure.
all those things are measured by extremely different, what
Very
confidence
different
is
standards.
one,
Yeah. Yeah. And
what confidence is on one end is completely different in our spectrum.
yeah,
Like,
it's the standards are so different. And I've slightly mentioned, but I went to engineering school. So while I've never, worked in a wood shop professionally, I do understand what it's like to work in a male dominated field. And I've been in engineering school wise and work wise for almost a decade now. So it's been quite a hot minute. There's always this pressure for women to infantilize themselves when they're in male dominated fields. And I did it for so long without even really realizing it, where it's just, stepping back, not trying to sound too confident about anything you say, not trying to really let on how much maybe like
absolutely.
playing a little dumb, just so you don't just become too much of a nuisance. And
Mhm.
it took me a really long time to realize that I was dumbing myself down and trying to pretend I knew less than I did. And I'm really grateful I'm at the point now where it's like, I never pretend I know less than I do. Obviously, I'm not out here pretending I know more than I do. I try to my goal is just to really appropriately estimate my abilities. And that's not me being cocky or anything. It's just, I say what I say. And if you've seen any of my videos, if I mess up, I'll tell you, but
Right.
I'm
That's
also,
so powerful. Like,
yeah.
holding space in that way is such a difficult thing too, because all of us are like either and I'm saying this for I think everybody, we're either overcompensating or undercompensating, and to just hold space and like I don't need to be an expert at this to hold space in any level is such a
Mhm.
powerful thing.
I think to confidently hold space like this, like at some point you kind of just have to put blinders on. And it's like I
Mhm.
used to kind of there was a point where I dumbed down my not dumbed down, but I dinkified it, and I just made like I was just like, I'm just gonna make like really nice aesthetic videos with like lo-fi music, and like it's just gonna be a really nice build video with like no green
Sure.
screen and no puppets and like no Dracula in the corner or whatever. And I remember it was so unfulfilling for me, but the reason I did it was because I was like, oh, people are gonna think I'm so weird, and it's just like, all these like people in the woodworking community, they're just gonna find me so annoying, and then I got to a point I was like, I can't think about that because it's like, yep, there's definitely people out there who find me annoying, and like I don't blame them because I'm at a certain like percentage of intensity, and
Sure.
that's fine, but it's like,
We're not for everybody. Like
yeah,
none of
and
us are for everybody.
yeah, but the thing is, no one is for everybody. And but the thing is, I was forsaking my personality and my art just so I could appease like an imaginary figure in my head who was judging me. I just hope my lack of inhibitions helps anyone kind of go forward, like pursuing what they want to do. Because it's like I said, my goal isn't to get every woman in woodworking to go out and buy a Dracula costume and 12 wigs and the green screen. It's like that's my way of expressing myself in like a fearless way.
For me, I'm not this loud, like talkative person.
Mhm.
So for me to teach felt intimidating because I felt like I had to be super personable and super like talkative and
Yeah.
hold the conversation. And I found that like there is a space, like I can create a space for myself where I can be kind of like more reserved and still be able to teach and
Right.
hold space in that way.
Yeah, and I think it's just the most powerful thing to do is like I feel like I've nestled out a really comfortable space for myself doing what I want to do and what's authentic to me, because we talked about like the me making videos that didn't feel good to me, and you've like found this power from like being like I don't have to be some kind of some kind of personality that I think I need to be a
Right.
teacher. I can just be like centered in myself, and that's like the most comfortable and like fulfilling way to live. Yeah,
I think it all ties back into what we're talking about of like holding space in an authentic way is like, you know what, if I wasn't I even want to say aggressive, and it's not aggressive, it's assertive, right? Like
Yes.
the difference between that is so wild. Like what I've been almost like taught is my assertiveness is aggression, and that's not the case.
Any holding of a boundary is like an aggressive move. But yeah, and that's what I talked about. Like it's certain situations will always be hard, but like the best thing I've done for myself in the past like 2 years probably is just put on the blinders. Like I'm sorry, I can't with you. I can't with that. I can't think about who's judging me. I can't think about who's like thinking I'm too aggressive. Like I have a circle of people around me in real life, and it's just like I'm not gonna let that kind of stuff dictate the way I behave.
And yeah, that's a powerful like setting boundaries like that is so powerful and so essential. Like I'm new to the whole like internet exposure thing, and it's like, yeah, I've had to restructure a little bit of the way I look at it because I take things like very personal, and I'm like, no,
Me too.
I just have to go
Me too.
go home, not read that stuff and not think about it because it's a lot to
I'm so
balance.
sensitive. Yeah.
And that's okay too.
It's totally
that's also
okay.
a thing is like it's not okay to be aggressive, but it's not okay to be like highly sensitive. And it's like we can be both of those things.
Right.
Being authentic is a really, I think, a hard thing for anybody, but navigating that, we're given a second layer of like subconscious thought that I feel like I have to maintain navigating being a woman in any male dominated field. And that's why I'm like, you're doing it at work and then you're coming home.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I respect.
I feel like I'm so used to it at this point that sometimes I don't even think about it. But the thing is also my woodworking is all internet based at this point. And it's just there are so many amazing women on Instagram who like I'm connected with. And that makes it easy for me and really enjoyable.
And there's something different about like I experienced this recently too. Like really it's strange I live in Austin and it's like very populated. You would think there are a lot of women woodworkers here, but I don't interact with women in woodworking hardly ever until recently. And we both just I did a trip and we both just like we're taking a trip in a car and we're like, this is so nice. Like we're gassing each other up. We're like hyping each other up in this really authentic way. And it just feels like it's safe. And it was the first time I'd like spent an extensive amount of time with women in woodworking in person. And it was just so like, it's so different. And for both of us to like acknowledge that, it just be like, wow, this is so nice. I went to a workshop of our own and there is this like energy in a women-owned space. So like I've assisted classes at Florida School of Woodwork, and it's sort of the same thing. Like people were like, what's going on in here? It's so like comfy and I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, it's a woman-owned shop. And it's just these like touches that feel welcoming, warm, like and it goes back to these very subtle things. And I think and all these things I think tie into our background and our history in this is like if we're able to communicate our personal experience into our work, it's not even, I'm not saying like your bed frame speaks like all these volumes on like who you are as a person, but the way you present it and the way you show that is such a different way and such a warm way that I'm like, you know what? I'm here for it.
Here for the
I
vibes.
feel
Yeah.
comfortable, I feel safe, like I feel welcomed in the space. And I just think that's such a
I'm
powerful
glad.
thing.
Because like I don't think there's anything too particularly interesting about the furniture I build itself, but it's like I'm here for
I love
mostly
it.
vibes. I feel like 90% of like my brand is just the vibes. And then woodworking.
And
Obviously there's
I mean, I
valuable
love the
woodworking.
product too. I love all of
Yeah.
it.
Oh, thanks.
But I get that too. And I think that's also such a great, like we were talking about before. Like if you build a hammock stand and you're happy with it, you don't like it's all about whatever makes you content and like what
Mhm,
makes people content
mhm.
and brings joy out of it. So whatever way that's executed is beautifully. I love your projects personally.
Oh, thank you.
I think you're making unique things all as well, which is like adds a layer to it.
Oh,
So
thank you. There was a time when I really wanted to make a Windsor chair, and I don't anymore. But the only reason I wanted to make, we were talking about making things that are authentic to you. The only reason I wanted to make a Windsor chair because everyone else was making them, and it was like the cool thing to do. And I think there's a lot of pressure, like, oh, I need to make like everybody's making like timbre doors. I need to do that, or everybody's making like I need to do something that's really cool and will impress
right.
people, as opposed to just being like, I want to make another bed frame, like, because that's what makes me
Yeah,
happy. I spent a lot of time trying to make things that I thought would impress people or would fit like the current like trends of
sure.
furniture.
And that
And
happens, cycles.
right, yeah, but it's really empowering to make something that's completely like something you're really driven, whether it's something for your home, like it's going to serve a functional purpose.
The thing I love about a bed frame is it is so functional and like so it's
I
so
love bed frame.
I know we love a bed frame.
I love them so much. I'm already planning my next. Are you going to build a bed frame soon?
I have to now. I actually really do.
Yeah, I'll be so excited to see it.
The beauty about a bed frame, I think, is it's so structured in one way that it allows the creative freedom to like
Mhm.
expand on it. And I've seen people make projects that are like, okay, here's how you get here, and here's the parameters. And then you're allowed to expand on it. So you're making bed frames in this way that is specific to you, but I think the bed frame in itself, you can go whatever direction you want with it in a way. So
There's
it's a
such a
really
variety.
beautiful
Yeah.
project to like, clearly because you've done it several times,
Yeah.
it shows just the like versatility of it. I think even in that, like those kind of projects are really important too. Is like we're not trying to build like we don't have to build a credenza, like it could be really this like, and I'm not saying a bed frame's simple, but I'm saying it's refined enough to that you can expand elements on it.
Mhm.
And that's I think a really fun thing about that project and
Yeah,
doing it
exactly.
several times.
Yeah, there's something about like the structure of it and the just the functionality of it. I just love so much.
All right, so I think we're gonna wrap it up. We're
Mhm.
closing up on time here, but any closing thoughts for everybody? There's something you'd want to share with anybody trying to get into this, or more you'd like to share about yourself?
Yeah, I think for people starting in woodworking, it's really hard, but well, I don't want to sound like so dark to start out. It can be a challenge to get your shop set up, but starting small is the biggest thing. Like if I was talking to my younger woodworking self, I would say just try to build the smallest thing you can, because I was just so overly
Yeah.
ambitious. You can get really overly ambitious by looking at all the social medias and seeing people do time lapse builds and quick YouTube video builds, and it gives you a really, improper visualization of how long things are going to take. So I would just say, yeah, start small and just go easy on yourself. Like,
Yeah,
just take
that's
it
good
easy,
advice.
and really just remember, like, if you're a hobbyist, why are you doing this? You're not making money, you're spending money to do it. And it's really, really like tap into like, why do you want to do this? There's going to be stressful points when you're learning a new craft or you're working on a project, but like the ultimate point is like finding joy in creating something yourself. And that's the most important thing. You don't want to just go into the shop to just suffer.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like it's so really, and I think a really important practical point in mitigating suffering in a shop is managing your expectations. And like I said, just starting really small. Like managing
Yeah,
expectations is a big thing, and that was probably my biggest sticking point starting out. I did not have good expectations, and it caused me a lot of suffering
that's
in
really
terms of
important.
time and
Yeah.
effort. Yeah, that's all I have to say on that though. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm
Okay.
so glad. Again, this is just something like for years I've been wanting to, I know we
I
talk, but like have this
like a
conversation,
real talk. Yeah,
real,
I
real
know.
talk. Such a privilege to have you here. And thank you for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Thanks for talking with me. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll
All
close
right.
it out. All right.
Yeah.
Bye,
Okay.
girl.
Bye.